When you hear the word psychopath, what comes to mind? A cinematic serial killer? A violent criminal locked away in a maximum security prison? Or someone lurking in the shadows waiting to strike? That's the Hollywood myth, and it's the exact myth they rely on to stay hidden in plain sight. The reality is far more subtle and far more dangerous. The modern psychopath isn't hiding in a dark alley. They're sitting across from you in the boardroom. They're running your department. They're managing your portfolio. They might even be sitting across from you at the dinner table. Welcome back. Today we're exploring the apex predator of the dark tetrad, the psychopath. If Machiavellianism is the software, the strategic cognitive manipulator of others, psychopathy is the hardware. It's a fundamental neurological difference in how the brain processes fear, empathy, and consequence. They're not playing the same game as the rest of us because they're not constrained by the same biological limits. We're going to dismantle the caricatures and look at the recent neurobiological research to understand exactly what makes a psychopath tick. We'll explore the chilling concept of the successful psychopath, the individuals who use their profound emotional deficits not to commit crimes, but to ascend to the highest echelons of corporate and political power. We'll look at how their brains physically differ from everyone else's, why their lack of fear gives them an unnatural advantage in chaotic environments, and why you might mistake their pathology for brilliant leadership. And most importantly, I'm going to show you the defensive protocols you can use if you ever find yourself targeted by a psychopath. Because you can't change them, you can't fix them, you can only manage your proximity to them, and you can only survive them. To understand a psychopath, you have to stop projecting your own emotional capacity onto them. This is the first and most fatal mistake that victims make, assuming that underneath that cold exterior there's a normal human being who can be reached with enough love, logic, or compassion. For a long time, psychology viewed psychopathy purely as a deficit, a broken machine. But modern multidimensional research, specifically the breakthrough triarchic frameworks published in 2024, has completely redefined how we look at this trait. Psychopathy is no longer clinically viewed as a single monolithic disorder. It's now understood through three intersecting dimensions: disinhibition, callousness or meanness, and boldness. Let's break these down. Disinhibition is a profound inability to restrain impulses. It's a constant, knowing need for stimulation, the reckless behaviour and the absolute disregard for long-term consequences. A highly disinhibited person lives entirely in the present moment. If they want something, they take it. The concept of future punishment simply doesn't register in their decision-making process. Callousness is a profound lack of empathy, guilt, or remorse. It's the chilling ability to look at another human being and see nothing but an object, a tool to be used, consumed, and discarded. When a neurotypical person hurts someone, their mirror neurons fire, creating a shared sense of distress. We feel bad because our biology forces us to. The callous individual is blind to this. They can inflict profound psychological or financial ruin on a family, a colleague, or an entire company, and sleep perfectly soundly that night. The third dimension, boldness, is what makes the psychopath truly formidable, and it's the focus of the most cutting-edge research today. Boldness is fearless dominance. It's a neurobiological immunity to anxiety and stress. Recent neuroimaging studies and functional connectivity network mapping have shown us that psychopathy isn't just about a shrunken amygdala, as science previously reported. It's about how the entire brain network coordinates. Specifically, we're looking at the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the anterior cingulate cortex, and recent discoveries surrounding cortical surface area compression. When a neurotypical person anticipates pain, consequence, or social rejection, their brain lights up with anxiety. The amygdala sounds the alarm, and the prefrontal cortex processes that alarm, acting as a biological brake pedal. That's what stops us from doing dangerous or socially destructive things. In a psychopath, that brake pedal is functionally disconnected. Their threat detection systems are muted. Imagine walking out onto a glass balcony 100 stories in the air. Your heart races, your palms sweat, your stomach drops, and the voice in your head and your body scream at you to step back. Now imagine the psychopath. They walk out onto the same glass, looking down, and feel absolutely nothing. Their heart rate remains at a steady resting pace. Now apply that biological fearlessness to a corporate negotiation, a massive financial risk, or lying directly to someone's face while looking at them in the eye. While you're sweating, stammering, and feeling the crushing weight of moral consequence, the psychopath is entirely calm. Their voice doesn't waver, their pupils don't dilate. They're not bravely overcoming fear, they simply don't experience it in the first place. And in a highly competitive, chaotic modern world, the complete absence of fear is a terrifying and highly effective advantage. Not all psychopaths are created equal. Clinical psychology draws a hard line between two distinct variants, primary and secondary psychopathy. Understanding the difference is critical to identifying exactly who and what you're dealing with. The secondary psychopath is often what you see represented in the criminal justice system. They're highly reactive, deeply dysregulated, and prone to explosive violence. Their psychopathy is generally believed to be a maladaptive response to severe childhood trauma, neglect, or profound environmental stress. They actually do possess the capacity for empathy, but it's been suppressed and overwritten by overwhelming anger, paranoia, and a hyperreactive threat response. They are impulsive, highly emotional in a destructive way, and their lives are characterized by unmanageable chaos. Because they lack control, they make mistakes. They're the ones who get caught and end up in jail. The primary psychopath is entirely different. Primary psychopathy is largely considered to be genetic, congenital, and deeply rooted in the neurobiological architecture we've just discussed. They're born with a biological emotional deficit. They're not reactive, they're highly proactive. They're not angry, they're ice cold. A primary psychopath doesn't act out of rage, they act out of pure utility. Because they possess that high level of fearless dominance, they're incredibly calculated. They have excellent impulse control when it serves their long-term goals. They're the 3D chess players, looking 5 moves ahead while everyone else is playing checkers. This brings us to the difference between cognitive and affective empathy. People often mistakenly believe that psychopaths cannot understand human emotion. That's completely false. A highly intelligent primary psychopath has flawless cognitive empathy. Cognitive empathy is the intellectual ability to read body language, identify insecurities, and understand exactly what another person is feeling. They learn early on that normal people have these strange invisible strings called emotions, and they spend their lives studying exactly which strings to pull to get what they want. They will perfectly mirror your vulnerability, simulate compassion with terrifying accuracy, and create a deeply convincing illusion of intimacy and soulmate-level connection. But what they lack entirely is affective empathy. They understand your pain intellectually, but they cannot feel it emotionally. To a primary psychopath, your emotions are simply data points. They're vulnerabilities to be logged, categorized, and exploited later. They can watch you cry over something they did to you, completely understand why you're crying, and feel absolutely nothing but mild annoyance or profound satisfaction that their manipulation worked. This brings us to the most unsettling aspect of modern psychopathy research, and the place you're most likely to encounter one: the successful psychopath. From an evolutionary psychology perspective, psychopathy is what researchers call a fast life history strategy. In harsh, unpredictable, or highly competitive environments, ruthlessness, short-term resource extraction, and a lack of social reciprocity are highly adaptive traits. It's an evolutionary mechanism designed for survival in high-threat environments. And what's the modern equivalent of highly competitive, high-stakes, high-threat environments? The corporate boardroom, Wall Street, high-level politics, the surgical theatre, the military, the police, and elite-level sports. Successful psychopaths possess the core traits of primary psychopathy: callousness, manipulation, and fearless dominance, but they combine them with high IQ and intact executive functioning. They possess greater grey matter density in specific areas, such as the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex, giving them superior impulse control compared to their unsuccessful criminal counterparts. They don't break the law, they bend it to breaking point. They don't commit physical violence, they commit psychological and financial violence. In the corporate world, psychopathic traits are frequently mistaken for brilliant leadership qualities. This is why they ascend the corporate ladder so incredibly fast. The successful psychopath operates in a distinct four-phase cycle within an organization. Phase 1 is the interview and honeymoon phase. Their pathological glibness and superficial charm are misidentified as charisma and vision. They excel in interviews because they have no anxiety. They will tell the hiring panel exactly what they want to hear, presenting themselves as the ultimate savior to the company's problems. Phase 2 is the assessment phase. Once hired, they immediately begin mapping the political landscape. They identify the power players to align with and the vulnerable targets they can exploit or use as stepping stones. Phase 3 is the extraction and manipulation phase. This is where they thrive in chaos. When a company is undergoing significant reorganization, restructuring, downsizing, or a PR crisis, neurotypical employees are paralyzed by anxiety and fear for their livelihoods. The psychopath is completely calm, clear-headed, and perfectly positioned to exploit the panic. Their callousness and utilitarian decision-making, their ability to fire 1,000 people without losing a second of sleep, is rewarded by the board as tough executive action. They practice what's known as kissing up and kicking down. To upper management, they're the golden child. To their subordinates, they're a nightmare of gaslighting, blame shifting, and psychological abuse. Phase 4 is the discard phase. They're organizational locusts. They fly in, drain the resources, take the credit for all the successes, aggressively scapegoat colleagues for the failures, and move on to the next host company before the massive damage they've caused is fully realized by the executive board. This is why traditional performance reviews rarely catch them. By the time the organization realizes what they've invited in, the psychopath has already secured their golden parachute and a glowing letter of recommendation. To truly understand how these traits manifest in the real world, let's take a look at the wreckage they leave behind. Here are 4 notorious case studies of high-profile corporate predators who perfectly illustrate the dark dimensions of psychopathy. The first case I've chosen is Bernie Madoff. Bernie Madoff executed what some say is the largest Ponzi scheme in world history, stealing an estimated $65 billion from his clients. What makes Madoff a textbook study in psychopathy isn't the money he stole, it's the profound callousness and fearless dominance he exhibited while doing it. Madoff didn't just steal from faceless corporations, he stole from his closest friends, his family, and massive global charities. For decades, he looked people in the eye, smiled warmly, and knowingly destroyed their life savings. He perfectly utilized the mask of sanity, presenting himself as a pillar of the community, a trusted confidant, and a deeply ethical financial wizard. When his empire finally collapsed, he exhibited virtually no effective empathy for the thousands of lives he ruined, treating his victims as mere collateral damage in his personal game of wealth accumulation. For the second case, I've chosen Elizabeth Holmes. Holmes, the founder of the disgraced blood testing startup Theranos, is a modern masterclass in pathological glibness and the interview phase of the successful psychopath. Holmes lacked a working product, yet she successfully conned some of the most powerful investors, military generals, and politicians in the world. How? Through relentless impression management. She famously altered her voice to a deep, authoritative baritone. She maintained intense, unblinking eye contact to simulate visionary conviction and brilliance. But the darkest aspect of the Theranos scandal was the absolute callousness. Holmes knowingly sent false blood test results to real patients, including pregnant women and cancer patients, completely indifferent to the life or death medical consequences, so long as it preserved the illusion of her corporate success. For the third case, I've picked Al Dunlop. Dunlop, the former CEO of Sunbeam, is one of the rare corporate figures who practically embraced psychopathic traits as a leadership style. He earned the nickname Chainsaw Al for his brutal, joyless execution of mass corporate layoffs, firing thousands of people to artificially inflate short-term stock prices before jumping ship. In fact, when researchers later assessed him using the psychopathy checklist, he scored exceptionally high, and his response was to argue that his psychopathic traits, like a total lack of empathy and a hyper-focus on winning, were exactly what made him a brilliant executive. He perfectly embodied the extraction and discard phases, treating employees as disposable until his ruthless cost-cutting was ultimately exposed as massive accounting fraud. For the fourth and final case, I've chosen Dick Fuld. Fuld, the final CEO of Lehman Brothers, provides a terrifying glimpse into the dimension of boldness. Known on Wall Street as the gorilla, Fuld fostered a hyper-aggressive, cutthroat corporate culture that punished dissent and rewarded pure, unadulterated risk-taking.
But what I really want to do is I want to reach in, rip out their heart, and eat it before they die.
His leadership style was defined by extreme hostility and a total refusal to accept weakness. When the subprime mortgage crisis began to fracture the global economy in 2008, Fuld's biological immunity to anxiety became Lehman's ultimate downfall. While others panicked, Fuld remained stubbornly, fearlessly convinced of his own invincibility. He refused multiple opportunities to save the firm, ultimately driving a 158-year-old institution into the largest bankruptcy in US history. Fuld's reign perfectly illustrates how the psychopath's complete lack of fear is a massive advantage on the way up, but a catastrophic liability when a cliff edge finally arrives. These individuals didn't succeed in spite of their pathology. They succeeded because of it, right up until the moment their masks finally slipped and the entire system collapsed around them. So how do you defend yourself against someone who feels no guilt, no fear, and sees you entirely as a chess piece to be used and discarded? You must completely abandon the idea that you can change them. You can't appeal to their better nature because they don't have one. You can't guilt them into treating you better because they don't possess the neurobiological hardware to experience guilt. If you're dealing with a psychopath, your only goal is containment, mitigation, and survival. First, implement the grey rock method. Psychopaths require constant stimulation. They get bored very easily and feed on their target's emotional reactions. When they manipulate, insult, or gaslight you, they're pulling a lever, looking for a payout, your anger, your tears, your frantic attempts to defend yourself. To become a grey rock is to completely deprive them of that payout. You must become the most boring, uninteresting, emotionally flat object in their environment. Don't argue. Don't defend your character. Don't show anger. Give them nothing but short, non-committal answers. Yes, no, I understand. I will take that into consideration. This is incredibly difficult to execute because it goes against every human instinct. We have to defend our honour and our truth. But when you stop providing emotional entertainment, the psychopath stops getting their dopamine hit. They'll eventually lose interest and seek out a more reactive, dramatic target. Second, meticulous paranoia-level documentation. Psychopaths are pathological liars and master gaslighters. They'll say one thing in a meeting, promise you the world, and deny it completely an hour later. They do this with such absolute fearless confidence that you'll begin to doubt your own sanity. Don't rely on your memory. Document absolutely everything. Follow up every verbal conversation with an email summarizing exactly what was said. Per our conversation at 2 p.m., I will proceed with X as you directed. Keep timestamps. Keep hidden records. If you're in a corporate environment, this paper trail is your only armor against their eventual, inevitable attempt to scapegoat you for their failures. Third, establish rigid, uncompromising structural boundaries. Psychopaths constantly test fences. They'll push a small, seemingly insignificant boundary just to see if you enforce it. If you let it slide out of politeness, they'll immediately push a bigger one. You must enforce your boundaries immediately, firmly, and without emotional justification. Don't explain why you're setting a boundary. They don't care about your feelings or your reasons, and any explanation you give will just be used as ammunition against you. Just enforce the rule, whatever it is. I don't answer work emails after 7 p.m., period. Fourth, organizational due diligence. If you're a hiring manager, a HR director, or a CEO, you must realize that the standard corporate interview process is a playground for a psychopath. They're masters of impression management and will easily charm a standard panel. To stop them at the door, you must rely on hard, verifiable data, not charm and culture fit. Conduct rigorous multi-source 360-degree reference checks. Don't just speak to the managers report to, but remember they kiss up flawlessly. You must speak to the peers they worked alongside, and crucially the subordinates they managed. That's where the bodies are buried. Ask former subordinates, did this person take credit for your work? How did they react when challenged? Did they foster a culture of fear? Furthermore, performance incentives must be tied to the long-term viability of their projects, not short-term quarterly gains, to discourage their locust-like extraction of corporate resources. The most dangerous mistake you can make when dealing with a psychopath is projecting your own humanity onto them. It's the belief that underneath the coldness there is a hurting person who is just like you. They're not. They're playing a fundamentally different game on a board you didn't even know existed, with rules that would make your stomach turn. Never attempt to out-manipulate a psychopath. Never attempt to seek revenge or expose them publicly unless your documentation is absolutely bulletproof. Their lack of fear and their lack of moral compass mean they're willing to go to lengths that you're simply not biologically capable of. If you try to fight them in the mud, you will lose because they live in the mud. If you identify a psychopath in your life, your ultimate goal should not be victory, it should be distance. Protect your mind, protect your boundaries, starve them of the emotional reactions they crave, and when the opportunity arises, quietly, methodically, and systematically remove yourself from their blast radius. Stay vigilant. Thanks for watching. If you found this video interesting and helpful, please like and subscribe to my channel. See you in your next episode, Addressing the Sadist.